Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for National Cannabis News with Cassin. I know that I said that I was going to be somewhere today, live and in person at a retail operation, but I made a mental health decision and said, you know what? I can't deal with driving 2.5 hours to Detroit and probably 3 hours back from Detroit today. Not after I did it for the last 2 days in a row. It's just been crazy on the highways going to Detroit. So I decided I will postpone that. Reached out to the owner of the facility, and they understood and appreciated that mental health is important. So here I am. We won't be going to visit there, but we will go ahead and talk about the rest of what was planned for today, including discussing, as we always do at the top of the hour, cannabis busts from around the globe and in the United States, what's going on Capitol Hill, what happened in cannabis science in this past week, and a lot of what just happened here in Michigan. I know I'm in Michigan. It matters to me. If you have a state and you are following and you want to know what's going on in your state and I'm just not covering it enough, I don't know that you want me to be covering it. So just say I do follow news all over the country, but I don't take deeper dives unless people ask me to. And certainly I'm interested in taking a deeper dive to what's happening here in Michigan. So that's why I do it. All right, so let's go straight up here with cannabis busts. There's been some pretty big developments in Missouri and California regarding hemp infused intoxicating edibles and beverages. And a big portion of this was the local health department and sheriff raiding VFW post 2661 in Missouri on 9/11 and seizing all of their cannabinoid containing hemp derived beverages from the facility. And of course, when they did this, they said it was for the children, which I think is really interesting because you don't see children at VFW posts. They're private clubs for veterans. So why are they harassing veterans, one might ask? Seems like there could be plenty of other people to be harassing. But in a prohibitionist mindset, everybody is created equally as a criminal. And of course, we need to stop them all from harming themselves. And we like to obfuscate why we're stopping them by saying that it's for children, or somehow to protect the environment, or, I don't know, keep our schools safe, when clearly it has nothing to do with that when you're taking away beverages, licensed, legal, federally legal beverages from veterans on 9/11. Like, you're just confused at that point. What were you thinking? But I think these things all the time, and I'm always wondering why prohibitionists are doing this and why our enforcement patterns are this way. I'm looking to more people getting busted in Oregon, just like we talked about last week, where they're really coming down on unlicensed operators. They've been doing this on the West Coast for a while. Not that they aren't doing it all over the country, but, busts are getting bigger and bigger, where, at the end of the season or the beginning of the harvest season, they're coming in and they're destroying everybody's plants before they can harvest them. They're seizing everything on the property. So if they had any cannabis that was actually ready for sale, they're taking it away. They're taking away all their guns. Sometimes they're taking all of their cash, right? In this past time, the citizens were arrested, again, in this case, arrested for something that most of us think is legal now, even though it's not. Okay, people are getting busted all over the country for it. And putting generally law-abiding farmers away for natural products that most adults, if not all, are there probably are, I don't know, a few adults out there that don't think that we should have access to these things, but putting those people in prison. And this is a continuing problem here, and right now the thing that's most frustrating to me is that it's licensed legal operators that are getting in bed with prohibitionists because they don't want to see competition from traditional market operators who may have been doing these activities for generations and in many cases don't even have the opportunity to join the licensed market. That's the thing that just, it hurts my soul to think more people are going to go to prison for the plant because of paperwork, right? For a plant that's not harming anyone. It just frustrates me greatly. Hopefully it's frustrating you as well. One of the things that I like to make sure that we remember is this plant that we have access to right now in our states is a privilege, and we have to earn that privilege. And we earn this privilege, okay, everyone out there, we earn this privilege by making sure our legislators know that we need it, that this is medicine, that the plant improves our quality of life. It reduces our usage of opiates, right? It reduces domestic violence. It solves so many medical problems for so many medical patients. Almost 30 million registered, not just users, but registered medical users across the country, right? And that all those people deserve to not go to prison for the plant. That is something that goes into a bill every single year as a rider for appropriations. That's happening right now. You guys may be aware that it's happening right now. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's going to be a government shutdown. But in the criminal justice and science section of the appropriations bill, there is a section that says that the government can't spend money hunting down medical providers, doctors providing prescriptions, or medical patients. And they can't do it if there are state licensed programs. That's what it says. But it doesn't have to be in there every year. And if we don't make sure it is, it won't be, right? It's been there every year for 10 years, or 9 years technically. This will be the 10th year if it goes in, but it's not in there right now. And they're trying to make the rules tighter where they are including it. There's a lot of amendments going around. So, this is just one reason why you can be looking at, what's happening on Capitol Hill as maybe impacting you. If you're a patient and you're consuming, you're protected right now by this rule, right? They're not supposed to come and harass you like they used to. Patients used to go to jail all the time, states all over the country, for consuming cannabis so they could have help with their cancer, for consuming cannabis so they could have help with their HIV or AIDS, right? For consuming cannabis because of their multiple sclerosis, for consuming cannabis for their epilepsy. We don't want to go back to those days, but we could. And when we look at what we see these busts in states that have licensed legal programs for, over a decade, what? Why? Right? It's all about the money is why. And it shouldn't be. Nobody should be going to prison for this plant. I know I say it all the time, but it needs to be said loudly and all the time. There's no reason to put people in prison for this plant. You want to put people in prison for, kidnapping children? Go for it. Raping women? Why not? But we don't do that on a regular basis. But man, if you're smoking a joint, better be ready to go to jail. Oh. All right. So, we already started talking a little bit about what's happening on Capitol Hill. Guys, I know. It's a lot going on with the election season. It's hard to think about what's going on there. But guess what? Our actions, right, are what is seeing the change. I didn't expect to see it in my lifetime, but we are. We are. Okay? So, even in some unlikely places, we are starting to see legalization gain traction, right? And so much traction that the prohibitionists are suing to stop the legalization activities, okay? Including now in Indiana and Nebraska. Nebraska has been a holdout, okay? They're one of 3 states that don't have anything at all that could be allowed. And now they've got the process of, petitions coming forward to say that these things should actually be discussed, and people are suing to stop them, right? They're suing to say, hey, we don't want them to be allowed to have this petition activity happening, right? We don't want citizens to be able to say, hey, we need this medicine in our state, not here in Nebraska, right? Now, that's prohibitionists saying, no, Nebraska is like the one place that's left. It's not really. Idaho and Kansas are still out there too, but that's what they're doing. They're feeling the burn. They're feeling all of us coming together and saying, no, we want to see this change. We want people to have access to this plant. We don't want people to go to prison for this plant anymore. And we don't want people to go to prison for this plant anymore. It's an important distinction from everything else out there in our criminal justice system, that we want people to be freed. We want to free the weed and all the people involved with it, right? Now, I say that while at the same time, states across the country are restricting intoxicating hemp products, right? Missouri, California. Oh, hello. Thank you very much for following. I'm so glad you were blessed. Nancy, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us today. We're talking right now about what's going on in Capitol Hill and across the country in different states. What we're seeing is a huge push right now for state legislatures and governors, like the governor of Missouri and the governor of California, to go ahead and just say, you know what, even though we couldn't get the law passed, we're going to have an emergency rule and say you can't have these intoxicating hemp products. Now, the crazy part about this is these hemp products have been shown to be legal in the courts over and over again. Okay? But the federal government, specifically the FDA, has declined to allow these products to be made into foods and dietary supplements, okay? Now, that hasn't stopped people, right? So even though it's always been against the rules, right, now people are starting to crack down on it, and they're cracking down on it because licensed operators don't want to see intoxicating hemp products in products. Now, could they instead say that these products have to be tested, right? That's what we're seeing in the bills, but it's not been moving fast enough for people. They can't get the traction they're looking for to actually include testing similar to other regulated products, right? And because of that, right, they're having to use these emergency measures. Now, do I think the emergency measures will stand? No, I don't. I think the courts have really well sided with hemp operators across the country over and over and over again. But that doesn't stop regulators and government officials from trying to do it, right? And that's why we have this balance of power between executive branches, legislative branches, and judicial branches, right? And I'm glad that we have it. Now, speaking of those balances of power, the Fourth Circuit said to the executive branch, look, you don't get to define how cannabinoids that are derived from hemp are legal or not legal. The legislature defined that in the hemp bill 2018. They were clear in that farm bill. That section, it allows all kinds of things. And they said you have to stop trying to prosecute people if they can show that the plants were legal. Everything else that comes from that is also legal. Boy, I'm sure the DEA is just mad as little hornets. And why wouldn't they be? They've been trying to figure out ways to enforce against cannabinoids, but they forget that the government said, the big government, the legislature, signed into law by President Trump, crazy I know, said, nope, these products should be legal. Now, could they double down on, hey, they can't be in food? Could they do more consent decrees? Could they have the FDA be more funded to go out and stop people from putting these things in foods and cosmetics and making drug claims? They could. They haven't, right? Instead, they're saying, oh, we're trying to figure it out still, and they're trying to arrest people, and they're seizing things from VFW posts, right? And they're making the states have to figure it out themselves. Now, I wish that they didn't have to, right? But getting them to agree on anything is very difficult. Right? So that's why we've been encouraging people that if this matters to you, if having access to hemp products matters to you, if being a hemp producer matters to you, if being a hemp grower matters to you, you should be reaching out to your legislature. In the same way as if you think that hemp products are dangerous, you should be reaching out to your legislature. Now, I don't think hemp products are dangerous when they're created in a regulated market. Why can't more places create regulated markets, right? Now, we're seeing a regulated market in Georgia for these hemp products. We're seeing a regulated market in Texas for these hemp products. Are those states less appropriate because they're deciding instead to create regulations for these products to allow these products to exist than places like Missouri and California that are saying, hey, we don't want these at all? I mean, I would never have thought that Texas would be ahead on something like this, but it seems like they might actually be. And I certainly wouldn't have thought that Georgia would be ahead on this because they've been very prohibitionist for a long time, just like Texas. But here they are establishing their program, and they're saying, hey, we aren't looking for anything other than intoxicating hemp products, right? Seems like to me that there are answers. There are paths forward. We just have to decide if we want to embrace them. And the only place I'm seeing where anybody is trying to do something different is where licensed operators already exist, and they don't want the competition from intoxicating hemp products. Now, it would be nice if everybody was playing together because cannabis is cannabis and cannabinoids are cannabinoids. But, you bring money into the equation, you bring livelihoods, you bring generational wealth into the equation, and all bets are off, especially when, we continue to see with such stiff competition in these places that, one or two new operators would be, unpleasant, right? But we're talking about, $40, $50 billion hemp industry coming in to play in the same sandbox, right? That's more than all of the licensed operators combined in the licensed legal states, right? So I know there's a lot to be said for that. You know, I'm excited to see where this is going to turn out, and I hope that everybody else is watching. You know, Farm Bill is maybe going to get kicked down for another year. I'm hopeful it's not, but you know, they only have a few weeks and they got other things to worry about, like funding the government for another year, right? Or 3 months or 6 weeks or whatever it turns out to be. And those things are important too. And it's worth noting that, just like we talked about earlier, the protection for medical patients is in appropriations. So we're going to know by the end of the month if we're going to maintain those protections or not. And if the protections aren't maintained, you know, what kind of enforcement is going to change? Because we couldn't convince the legislature that they needed to continue, you know, defending the 30 million patients that you need this product for their livelihood, for their quality of life, for their life in general in some cases, right? Like, I know it's important to my family. My wife is a medical patient. You know, she has multiple sclerosis. She needs access to cannabis to treat most of her symptoms. There aren't other products that work for her. We know this because we tried most of them when she got MS, and it just wasn't working at all. And cannabis means that she doesn't have spasms. Not having spasms means she can walk. Walking is kind of important. You know, not having spasms means that she can eat without vomiting. That's kind of important. Not having nausea means that she might be hungry, so then she can gain some weight back, so that she has some more strength, so she can have some more stamina, so that she could walk more if she wanted, right? Like, there are all these things that cannabis is doing for my family, and I know it's doing it for millions, tens of millions of other families across the country as well. That doesn't include all the people that aren't even claiming themselves as medical patients that are getting help with sleeping, that are getting help with pain, that are getting help with taking an edge off the anxiety of the society that we live in, right? All of those things exist too. And if we continue that conversation and we go a little further, we can look at the science that just came out this week, right? Right now, here we're seeing more studies. 2 more studies came out this week. Okay, guys? A big study came out and said, hey, guess what? What we've all known for a long time is that cannabis is really good for nerve pain, right? Like that pain that's even opiates don't help with. Cannabis works for it, right? That neuropathic pain for diabetics, cannabis works for that, right? The scar tissue pain from injured nerves, right? You've burned yourself really bad and there's nothing you possibly do. That nerve pain, like the gabapentin taking nerve pain, or if gabapentin doesn't work for you, you're just gonna suffer, right? Had the pain that people have in their face, the suicidal pain that people have, right? It works for them. Clinical trials showing that it's working. Now, of course, we've known this. Okay, people have been using cannabis topically, you know, edible, smoking it, etc. for decades, centuries for this. Like, sometimes I wonder, hey, if we've been using it for pain management for centuries, is this really even new science? Probably not, but it's new science with clinical data to back it up, right? And that goes back to, hey guys, why aren't we already doing this? Why hasn't the government already said, yeah, we agree this has medicinal properties? Because we have tens of thousands at this point of clinical trials that show that it does, right? Certainly that it might even be better than many other options. You know, if with pain, we're still seeing study after study that comes out that if you use cannabis as an exit drug from opiate addiction, right? That you use between 30, depending on your state and your condition, 30 and 70% less opiates when you have access to cannabis. I mean, that's huge, right? That's harm reduction, right? That's literally saying I can get the relief that I need from a plant that isn't going to kill me. It's probably readily available, that I might be legally allowed to grow in my own home, create my own medicine, plants being the best medicine. And why would we want to keep that out of the hands of citizens? Why is not every member of the legislature saying, yes, this is what we should be doing? Are they still confused? Are they still believing in reefer madness? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. And we as citizens should be asking. Because every time we get another study that says something like this, you gotta wonder why we wouldn't want that, right? Now, let's look at another study. Just came out, University of Georgia, Indiana University, working together. They found, after reviewing millions of patient records, right, because there's 30 million patients in the United States that are taking this, after reviewing millions of patient records, they found that cannabis legalization leads to a 10 to 20% drop in benzodiazepine usage. Okay, all those wonderful anxiety and insomnia medications that are out there, right? Those emergency, I'm having a panic attack, let me pop this pill so that I don't think I'm going to die medications out there. They found that when cannabis is legalized, people used less of those, just like they use less of opiates, right? Just like diabetics use less insulin, right? Just like probably we have better treatment for neuropathic pain, right? They're finding this again. Now, we have known for a long time, right, as a cannabis community, that cannabis helps you sleep. Now they're saying, oh yeah, people take less drugs for insomnia when they have access to cannabis. Really? Who would have thought that something that helps you sleep would help you not have to take drugs for insomnia? I mean, I guess you're taking a drug for insomnia. But guess what? Benzodiazepines, highly addictive, and they can kill you with overdose. Cannabis, maybe addictive, doesn't kill you with an overdose. Sometimes I feel like the harm reduction part is missed, and we have to reiterate it over and over again, right? So here we are having cannabis, not having the side effects from benzodiazepines, creating more science, looking at more clinical data, looking at more observational data, saying, hey, this works, it does the things it's capable to do. Last week we discussed that they just came out with a clinical trial that says CBG reduces anxiety, and they did it in a blind clinical trial where some of the cannabis had CBG in it and some of the cannabis didn't have CBG in it, and the stuff that had CBG worked better. What? This is the science that we've been asking for. Now that we have the MMR, we can do this work, and we'll be able to do more and more of this work if we reschedule. We would be able to do so much of this work if we descheduled completely. That's the kind of thing that we need to be asking for when we're looking at cannabis science. I know I talk about it every week, and I feel like you guys care about it, but sometimes I wonder, really wonder, why prohibitionists don't want to believe in that science. They don't want to believe that there's medical value. They're literally still saying that there isn't, as though all of the science showing that it's helping, as though 30 million patients are just confused, as though 38 state legislatures are just confused about all of the things and ways that cannabis helps people. They still just believe that it has no value and that it's so addictive that no one should be able to have access to it because it harms society so greatly and people so greatly, even though we've proven that it doesn't, even though we show that it makes communities behave better. It reduces crime almost across the board. It 100%, huge reductions in domestic violence, right? We're showing grand reductions in opioid overdoses. We're showing people harm reduction and reduction in usage of, at this point, anxiety medications, pain medications across the board. These are real goods for us. Real goods, solid, wonderful things. Just this week, I was able to talk to MSA. Again, they're doing a study right now. They're going to have a white paper out pretty soon, right? And it's showing, hey, guess what? People who are consuming cannabis might be having fewer heart attacks, might be having fewer strokes. Let's look a little deeper into that. If the number one cause for death in America is heart attack, and we can reduce that by a little bit of cannabis usage, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? Makes no sense, right? Makes no sense at all. But believing in science is hard for, a not insignificant portion of our society. So I guess I can understand why prohibitionists would continue to do that. All right, so I think that's been good, solid conversation about what's been going around the U.S., what's happening in the science world. Let's go ahead and transition over to what's happening in Michigan. Okay, guys, so there was a public meeting. There was a DCA reform report that came out. We had another formal complaint that came out. Last night there was a National Cannabis Industry Association Stakeholder Summit, which was amazing, right? There's just so much that's happening. I'd really like to talk a bit about the top issues from the disciplinary action report, which, have changed over time. And so I feel like it's important to highlight this. The two things coming in at number one, okay, guys, is failing to report material changes. Like, literally, you didn't fill out a report to say you're making a change and submit it. It is a single piece of paper. It's one page. It has maybe 6 blocks that you have to fill out on the one page. It's a form. It's very easy to fill out, right? Just fill the form out. Submit the form. Now you haven't failed to report your material changes. Like, this is a documentation issue that it frustrates me that people are going to be getting fines, right? And they might give suspensions because they're failing to report these things. It's, potentially costing companies lots of money, which might impact things like workers, right? The ability to have compensation, the ability for someone to pay their bills, the other cannabis companies that they're interacting with, right? All, again, because they fail to fill out a form. Fill the form out, guys. This is pretty simple. Okay. There's also still continues to be a lot of metric noncompliance. Look, guys, I help people with metric all the time. I know metric is complicated. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. I know there are a lot of people out there that don't have experience using databases, that don't have experience using computers, that are using tools from third parties to try to manage metric, and then things get messy and they don't know how to fix it. I get it. Ask for help. I know it sounds crazy, but Dr. Chiro's department is great for helping. Metric support, while difficult to work with, and I know it's hard to learn all the things and get the question asked the right way and convey to them what the problem is because you don't understand the problem yourself, right? Ask for help, right? If you have to ask me. I am here. I've been working with metric for a decade. I will help you. Don't just let it fester, because you're going to get in trouble and you're going to get written up and you're going to get a fine. And I bet an hour of your time on a phone call figuring the issue out would be better than a $10,000 fine. I bet. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's probably the case, right? And then coming in at number 3, guys, is surveillance and security issues. I know. I don't want to have to be under camera all the time. I'd like to be able to have windows that are open and letting in spring breezes, fall breezes, listening to the rustling of leaves. I would. I'm in Michigan. It's freaking beautiful here right now. I would really like it. But the rule says that you can't. The rule says you can't just open the windows. The rule says you can't prop those doors open. The rule says everything has to be under a camera. So, for these people who just got in trouble this past month for not having those things in place, when it's been very clear from the very beginning that you had to, right? It just comes back to it again. Tell them what's happening, explain what's going wrong, right? And if you're saying to yourself, man, I need to have this door propped open because I don't have, oh, hey, thanks, Grace. Appreciate the follow. Thank you. We're talking right now about the disciplinary action report that just came out and the top issues. And right now we're discussing people getting in trouble for not having appropriate security and surveillance at their facilities. I know it's crazy. I think it's crazy. I will continue to say that it's crazy that we have to literally have more protection for our facilities than banks. We have to have more protection for our facilities than nuclear processing plants. For the harm reducing plant. But maybe one day we'll convince the legislature that kind of stuff isn't necessary by all saying, wow, it seems pretty silly that everything has to be on camera all the time. Again, it's a plant, it's a commodity, especially in Michigan where prices are so low that, it probably costs you more in gas money than what you would steal. But I could be exaggerating there. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what happened at the public meeting. Hopefully you guys were at the public meeting, or you came to the public meeting via Zoom, or you listened to the public meeting after. But if you didn't, you get me. I'm going to give you a digest because I took 10 pages of notes during the public meeting, and I love to share that with you. Things that I really want to make sure everybody remembers is that the new rules have been submitted to the next step. We will see them soon. Right? They're going through the process of legislative legal review or whatever. And yeah, we're going to see them. And when we see them, we will have 30 days to provide comments. So be prepared, be watching, be paying attention, because this is your one opportunity to say, hey, I don't like the new rule, right? I guess we all had 2 years to say we didn't like the summary of new rules, but the actual new rule. And Director Hannah was clear. This is a full rewrite. All the rules are new now. You're gonna have to update every SOP that references a rule. At least I will. But I felt like that was something that was important. I know we've all been asking that question. And a couple of things that he also wanted to point out. He was very clear that the new rules will completely prohibit conversion of non-intoxicating cannabinoids to intoxicating cannabinoids. Kind of huge. Don't know that I agree with that. It's always pretty terrible to stifle innovation, but, that's what public comment periods are for, right? That's what saying, hey, shouldn't we be able to, like, make CBN out of CBD if we want to? Shouldn't we be able to make THCV out of CBD if we want to? That's how I feel about it, especially because, some of these compounds are very difficult to get, but I don't make the rules. I just comment on them. Okay. Also, there's going to be a new rule provided on remediation. I know a lot of people have asked about remediation in the past. I'm not 100% sure, quite honestly, what that remediation rule is going to look like. There hasn't been a lot of clarity on it. I'm hoping that it has something to do with labeling. Maybe labeling will be done. I know there's a lot of consumers out there that wish they knew if their product had been irradiated or not. There was a lot of news about what's happening in training for the CRA, including some fancy new HACCP training for all of their officers, which I think is great because there's a lot of things being missed that impact the safety of products that are going to be consumed by humans. And so a little more training on HACCP I think will help with that. So that's great. Right, moving right along, there were a lot of people who got up and said a lot of good things. I was super happy to hear Lindsay from Mineral Transport get up and talk about the plight of transporters and how difficult people are making it and why the rules need to be specific. I hope that the new rule has been written taking her comments into account. I know she's been commenting on this every public meeting I come. I hear her, I listen, I hear what she says. She's consistent, respectful with it. Bravo, Lindsay, for coming out and doing that. We also had 2 members of the Redbud Roots team come out and talk about things. They were really looking to see some recalls. Last night, Director Hannah talked about why we haven't seen those recalls yet, right? The legal difficulties of going through due process to get to the point where we could see that. I was glad to hear that the process is there. We're just not at the end yet. And I'm also happy to think, enforcement is happening. A lot of times I'm uncomfortable with the level of enforcement that's happening, mainly because it seems like sometimes things are silly. Like, if people aren't being killed, or if people weren't gonna almost be killed, should we be doing enforcement? I don't think so, but that's also because I think that we should treat cannabis like tomatoes. I don't think I'm gonna get what I'm asking for, but I still think it, and so I share it with others like you today. There was one hemp operator who got up and spoke, and I felt like he really had some good information to say. We had a pretty robust hemp program 4 years ago, and now we're down 75% in our hemp operators. These are mostly farmers that, in general, as far as I can tell, we're mostly growing for fiber and grain, and they're not here anymore. This is a cash crop in the United States right now that we generally are importing from China. And if we're not growing it here in Michigan, we're probably growing it in Indiana or Illinois or Missouri or Tennessee. And that means, we're not helping with sustainability. I really appreciated with what this gentleman had to say. Because, seriously, without acknowledging how much help hemp can do for all kinds of things, and fostering, bringing that here, it's just going to go somewhere else. And we could use those jobs here. There's plenty of farmland that would benefit from erosion control and not needing a bunch of extra nutrients added to it that the hemp plant can offer us, as well as the carbon sequestration that comes from growing the hemp plant and the products that come from it. It could really just be helping everyone. I know it matters to me, maybe it matters to you, especially for things like our Superfund sites, where cannabis is really, really good at helping sequester the materials that are dangerous at the Superfund site and then putting into another material that then can't erode and get into groundwater and those kinds of things. But if we're not fostering our hemp program, if we're not encouraging more growers, if we're not making the barrier to entry acceptable, right, competitive, then they're going to go somewhere else. We're almost double all of the nearby states as far as how much it costs to get a hemp license. And, you know, that makes farmers think twice, right? So I don't want them to, but that is also the case. Summer got up again and talked about why it should be appropriate for us to smoke cannabis in places where you can smoke tobacco and drink alcohol. I think this was probably the thing that raised my heart the most during the whole public meeting. You know, how right is this? Right? Like, if you can smoke a cigarette somewhere, why shouldn't you be able to smoke cannabis? Especially if you can smoke a cigarette and get drunk, right? Because then it's not about smoke and it's not about intoxication, because you're already allowing smoking and you're already allowing intoxication. Then it's just about discrimination against the plant and the users of the plant. And I don't like to hear that. So I was really happy to see that. We had a number of people come and talk about clones and nurseries for the state and how we could use some more less ambiguous rules, which I really appreciated, because I have also considered being a nursery and then been like, wow, that's not going to work. Right? Like, I can only have plants that are 8 inches tall and they can't even be very wide. And that's based, like, no one wants to buy a 4-inch tall 1-leaf clone. Like, I mean, if I would kill that clone. That clone wouldn't get up potted. So, you know, it was really nice to be able to hear from that. It was a different review as well, and that was nice, because, you know, you don't often hear from people on the front end. You usually are just hearing from people on the back end. Josh from Infinite Cal came on and spoke two separate times, had a lot of good things to say. Huge thing here that Josh said that I really appreciate was that if you are a retailer or a consumer and you are concerned that a vape product that you have might be contaminated, you can drop that vape product off at Infinite Cal and ask them to test it for contaminants, and they will do it for free. Like, this was huge. I know as, retail compliance officer, I have been worried about testing all these things. It's incredibly expensive to test these. You know, the testing itself is going to cost me 3 or 4 times as much as buying the product did when I first got it. And knowing that he's willing to step up because he wants to protect the public and offer this testing free of charge was huge. I hope other labs get on board with this to really help us get to a point where we're able to, as patients, as adult use consumers, be confident that the vape products in the state of Michigan are safe for consumption again, because it's definitely not the case right now. He also let us know that, you know, the methods are validated and that he's making them available to everyone, especially the state testing lab, so they don't have to try to reinvent things. I know I've gotten the opportunity to work with them trying to make international methods, and I appreciate that he consistently puts his money where his mouth is. There are so many people who will complain about things but are not willing to do any heavy lifting to make our industry better, and Josh definitely does. Like, he's there doing the heavy lifting to try to make things safer for consumers. And he doesn't have to. He really doesn't, but he does. And so I appreciate that greatly. Hopefully you guys do as well. You know, there were a lot of other people who had a lot of really good things to say about, you know, how there should be better standards for enforcement. There's a gentleman named Theo who really wanted to thank us and point out that there could be a better standard for organic production in Michigan. And I agree. Like, we can't get organic standard because federal rules. Maybe that'll change with rescheduling. But we could have something here in Michigan to say, hey, if you're doing all of these things right, you know, you get this extra, you know, all-star badge of approval. You know, we have it for social equity. We have it for veterans programs. You know, why couldn't we have it for organic standards? You know, why couldn't we have them submitting things and doing extra testing and, you know, agreeing not to irradiate things, just like they would if they were going through the USDA? I think it's great, and I think that it would be really good if we all considered that consumers, even if it's a small portion, would like to see this kind of information, especially when we get back to, you know, those new rules, which might have to do with remediation. You know, a lot of people, they might not care that much if things are remediated or not, but they'd like to know, right? And then they can make a conscientious choice. You know, do I want to smoke irradiated weed or not? You know, I have to be honest. I think a lot of people won't care. But the people who do care, they should have the information available to them. All right. Moving right along. We saw Willie. It was great. It was nice to to see that, and I really appreciated that there was a stance here that was presented, and I might have misinterpreted it. So Willie, if you're listening, feel free to let me know. But the stance here was specific to everybody knows what's going on, and if you're still buying the cheap as an operator, you're part of the problem, and we should be acknowledging that the building is on fire, right? And not fighting each other in this way, and acknowledging that, like, we're literally throwing fuel on the fire every time you buy something is cheaper than it should be, right? And I know people are making these decisions, and it's hard to make the decisions because your business is struggling, but, when you buy from someone that clearly is bringing material in from out of state, and you don't think they should be allowed to, but you're buying from them anyway, you're fueling the problem, right? So it was really great to hear someone else say that, and really looking at as well that it's just going to get worse when we consider the other states that are coming on around us, and how things are going to continue moving in and out, and if we really don't want that. Now, personally, I just want federal descheduling. I don't want there to have to be licenses. I don't want there to have to be seed to sale tracking. I don't want there to have to be crazy security and surveillance, right? Again, I think we should be able to grow cannabis like we grow tomatoes, right? And quite honestly, I don't know if you guys have looked at this recently, but in like the last 20 years, tomatoes have accidentally killed people more than cannabis because they're contaminated. But they don't have to be under surveillance, and there's no seed to sale tracking. Right? And they don't have to do, 25 pounds per batch testing, right? Like it's a much different program for tomatoes, even though people are harmed by tomatoes as well, right? So, and I know it's a little reaching there, but it's also the truth, right? Like lettuce kills people, cannabis hasn't killed people, right? So come on, let's continue on that conversation. And speaking of harming people, thank you so much, Stacy, for getting up there and talking about cannabis workers. I know I talk about workers sometimes too, guys. And it comes up on the show. It comes up when, people are talking about shutting other people down, getting rid of competition. And, a lot of times I feel like when people are talking about that, they're only thinking about themselves and their business, but they're not considering their workers. They're not considering that some of these bigger operators that might get shut down might have 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people working for them. And if they're shut down, those 100 people don't have anywhere to work. And the cannabis industry is good jobs. We employ almost 1.5% of the employed people in the state of Michigan work in our industry. If we go around shutting a bunch of people down, where are all those people going to go? Right? Or are we going to be, 5%, 6%, 7% unemployment because we don't have cannabis operators available to do the work in Michigan any longer? Not only that, but where's all the stats? Why am I having to look somewhere other than the state report to know how many cannabis workers there are? What about how many times cannabis workers have been harmed? What about how many times OSHA's had to come in? What about how many lost days there's been in our industry? And you can find it for some other industries. How can we get that information more readily available so that we can know that our workers are being protected, that they're being paid well? Stacy brought it up that workers are asking for help, and they're not really getting it, even from the government officials that are supposed to give them the help. Combine that with that they're still not receiving training. Combine that with that the standards that exist for the industry are not specific to the cannabis industry, but they are broad for all industries, for general industry. And we have known harms in our industry, pesticides, dust, exposure to microorganisms that you don't really have everywhere else, right? And then we should be considering that. We should 100% be considering that. And that includes the agency talking about these things during the public meetings, right? Because as Stacey so well put it, like, you would not have 1 million units, 100 million units, $3.2 billion worth of sales if it wasn't for the workers. We're the ones growing the plants. We're the ones trimming the plants. We're the ones harvesting the plants. We're the ones, watching the plant as it dries. We're the ones bucking it. We're the ones trimming it. We're the ones putting it in a bag. We're the ones carting it over to your retail facility. We're the ones handing it out to the customers. That's all us. the workers, right? You know, I'm not saying owners don't do work, because some of them do, but there's 30,000 of us, and there's only like 700 of you, so we're the ones doing the heavy lifting here. Okay, and then we had wonderful note from Brandy from Americans for Safe Access, letting us know, just like she did last week, about the new patient information that's available that you can get on the Americans for Safe Access website. I know I put a link out there last week, so, you know, guys, if you have a question about that, you can get it. You know, there was a lot of questions about, you know, patient safety and making sure that, you know, we're moving forward, talking about removing fees. You know, like, patients get protection from the federal government. If you're consuming and you're consuming for a medical reason and you don't have your patient card because it costs money, we want to know, okay? Like, because we think that there should be a way that if you are getting any other kind of assistance, if you're on disability, for instance, that you shouldn't have to pay for your medical card, right? That way you can have that protection from the federal government coming in and making your life unpleasant. That's, you know, part of the appropriations bill we talked about earlier. You know, I thought that this was a great thing that she asked for. You know, I think it's always good that we do whatever we can to make it easier for patients to be patients, because patients are already struggling with the medical establishment, right? They're already dealing with, you know, time off from work. They're already dealing with pain, right? They're already dealing with whatever their symptom is making them a medical patient. You know, we don't making them have to jump through a bunch of government hoops when they've already jumped through so many government hoops. Like, anything we can do to fix that, I think it'd be good. She also asked, again, what's going on with the $40 million that's been granted to universities for the research with veterans. You know, I know that there's been some reports that they are almost to the point of being approved by the FDA to do this work, and hopefully that will happen, and then we'll actually be able to see some data. But those things always take time. I feel like it's been about 2.5 years, so, you know, if it was 4 years in, I'd be wondering what the hell's happening, but the FDA is notorious for moving very slowly, so there's that. Oh, Minish! Thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate it. Glad that you're here. You know, we're talking about what happened at the public meeting this week here in Michigan with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency and the different comments that were made. Super excited about that. Next comment I'd like to talk about was made by Robin Schneider, the director of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. You know, like, I love this. She called out a call to action at the public meeting for everybody who was there. I will reiterate this. Like, contact your lawmaker if you want to see the laws changed, right? Director Hannah doesn't get to do that. Us all griping about it doesn't make a change. What makes a change is a legislature, right, going out and writing a bill together and then putting it in committee hearing and then putting it to a vote, and then the Senate votes, right? And then it goes to Governor Whitmer for signature, right? This doesn't just happen all on its own, right? The laws that we have now didn't happen all their own, right? They didn't even start that way. They started by a bunch of people getting together and be like, we fucking need this. Let's get petitions out there. Let's get it on the ballot. Let's vote on it, right? Like, you have to be active and engaged if you want to see change. We're seeing a lot of change because of our activity and engagement, but we can go the other way too, right? We can go, like, people can get engaged on the other side, and we can take steps back to prohibition if we're not careful, right? So I felt like that was really good, you know. And one of the things I saw as well, which I really appreciated, when people ask and they say, hey, I'm seeing another program, and I think the way they're doing it might be easier for operators and still get us to a seed to sale tracking situation. Although I am kind of like frustrated with the whole premise of needing seed to sale again, because why not treat cannabis like tomatoes? Yeah, so John Cam of Oceana Gardens said, why can't we do batch harvesting? And I think that's a good question. And he pointed to the program in Maine, which still uses the same kind of seed to sale tracking system, but allows you to gangway plant. So you put 10 plants in a bucket, and, well, probably a tote, not a bucket. But you put 10 plants in a tote, and you weigh them. I know when I was in Arizona, this is how we did it, because we were always cutting the plants continuously, and we didn't harvest a plant. We harvested limbs off the plant. So if we had to figure out how to weigh individual plants in Arizona, there would have been no way to make that happen. I know we do it here because it's the law, but, you know, it doesn't have to be the law, right? We can make changes. right? Because it's not in the statute that it has to be that way. That's just the way they wrote the rule. So maybe they'll go ahead and make that change. I don't know. If there's people out there in the audience, we're coming on the last 10 minutes of the show. We've talked about what happened recently here in Michigan. We talked about the DCA report. We talked about the public meeting. I mentioned the National Cannabis Industry Association Stakeholder Summit, where I was on a panel last night with Director Brian Hanna and Allison Iverson and Rebecca Collette. We were able to talk about a lot of things. And, one of the big things that I think that we often forget about here in Michigan is just how great the program is. Yeah, I will complain about it all day, but I have someone to complain to and a venue to do that in. And the discourse is candid and friendly, and I can actually see the change from the complaints, right? There are so many other places where they won't even hear you, right? It's all behind closed doors, locked meetings, where you don't have the privilege to sit at the table and have conversations with them. That's not the way it is here in Michigan. We have these public meetings every quarter. You always get to talk to him. Even if you can't respond right at the meeting, you're going to get an answer soon. Every time I come in and ask questions, I get an answer, within a couple of weeks usually, sometimes within the next day. Like I got from questions I asked in the public meeting, and then I heard the answers at the Stakeholder Summit the next night. I feel really good about that. So we are accepting questions. This is an Ask Me Anything time period, guys. If something is burning and you're thinking, man, I wish I could ask Cass, I'm here. Go ahead and type it in the chat. And I accept questions all the time as well. If you want to send it to me on LinkedIn, if you want to send it to me in the future, if you're on Twitch, I've got my links there so you guys can get to me. I try to be as available as possible. I'm not trying to live secretly here. I'm here, I'm in Michigan, I'm a licensed operator, I'm a cannabis worker. I literally do data entry and metric for at least 10 hours a week, right? That's my life here. I'm here sharing this with you guys because I have a passion for making sure people have the knowledge. And I'm a cannabis and policy wonk. I love what's happening and seeing this change, and I want to share it with you guys because not everybody wakes up at a ridiculous hour because they can't sleep and just wants to read cannabis news like I do every day, but I certainly do. I'm blessed to be a member of Safer Mich and be able to get all of that news straight over to me. I'm blessed to have all of the people who share that news every day, and because I'm blessed, I can share it with you. And I hope that you guys will continue to show up and listen and ask questions, because the more questions you guys ask, the more digging I can do, the more knowledge I can gain, then I can share with other people. Because if you have a question, there's going to be 10 other people who have that question too. So if you ask, other people are going to get the answer that they're looking for, and they just haven't decided that they have the courage to ask the question yet. Plus, no question is a dumb question. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call it an end. We've gone over all the important things. Next week, we're really looking to chat with more people in the hemp industry. There's been a lot of change with hemp over this year. We're seeing, California, Missouri, et cetera, doing things. We had Director Hanna say that conversions are going to be banned. And, we're already looking at the hemp program here in Michigan it appears to be dying off. So Whitney Economics has reported that it looks like a projected fall off over the next 5 years of over 75%. If you're a hemp operator, I want to hear from you. Are you doubling down? Are you looking for an exit? Are you giving up? What does it look like for you? Are you renewing for next year? Are you going to plant in the spring? If you are, I'd love to know. If you're not, I'd love to know, right? So let's see if we can get some hemp operators out here, hemp growers, hemp handlers, hemp from across the nation to come have this conversation live with me here on the show. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope that you really enjoy your weekends. It's been a pretty eventful week in cannabis, as clearly you can see, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Ciao.